and Regen Scrutiny panel. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. And at the moment, we have two apologies from Councillor Peter Black and Councillor Will Thomas. Item 2 is the disclosure of personal and prejudicial disclosure of personal and prejudicial interests. Are there any members with any of these interests? No? Any officers? No. Okay, before we go any further, I'd like to go around the room and introduce some of the people here, because some of the officers are not known to members, and I think it would be a good idea if we had a name to a face, okay?
Rachel Percival, Scrutiny Officer.
Right, good morning. My name is Councillor Michael Locke, representing Scrutiny.
I'm Councillor Linda James from Pennard Ward.
Councillor David Hopkins, Joint Deputy Leader.
Head of Housing and Public Health.
Tom Price, I'm the Divisional Officer for Pollution, Private Sector Housing and Building Control.
John Roberts, Building Control Team Lead.
Jeff Jones, Councillor Kelly and Dunban, sorry. Okay. The next item is the prohibition of votes and declarations of party whip. That's number 3 on the agenda. Item 4 on the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting. You've all had them. I'm assuming everybody's read them. Are they a true and accurate record? Who's got a hand up? Oh, Sue.
Chris, I think I'm down as SH Jones, not SM Jones.
Okay, well, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Jerry.
Matthew's got his hand up.
Matthew, got your hand up?
Yeah, hi Chair. Just with regards to members who apologise for that meeting, there's 2 M Joneses down. I'm not sure if one relates to Mary, but I was in attendance at the last meeting. I'm the only one without a middle name.
Okay, Matthew, we will check up on that. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, item 5 is the public questions. We don't have any members, only one member of the public here, and I don't think you got any questions. No. Fair enough. Then we'll move on to item 6, which is the substantial item of the scrutiny panel today, and that's the audit Wales reports cracked in the foundations, building safety in Wales. I thank Councillor David Hopkins, Deputy Leader, for coming along as the principal cabinet member, and I'm sure he would like to start off.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it. And thanks to the deferment that we asked for last month. There was some particular difficulty with staff and quite a fluid situation at the particular time. And it really helped, particularly, I don't want to go into any detail there, but particularly with the private sector, we are in a very aggressive position with the private sector looking for staff. And so we think we got some stability on this particular issue. And I appreciate the deferment. With me today, I've got 3 members of the team who work very closely and aware of this audit report. And I don't want to go into any detail at this particular time, but I'm more than happy to hand over to Tom, who will take us through the report.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
Morning, everybody. I don't intend to sort of read through the report, as you've all no doubt had a chance to read it, but just to set the scene. Obviously, the Auditor General for Wales carried out this report and published it obviously last August with regard to the changes to the building regime in the light of the Grenfell tragedy in 2017. So as of the 6th of April, sort of the new requirements have come into force with the competency of building inspectors. And suppose the 8 recommendations that the report made, 4 of them were directed at Welsh Government and 4 directed to the local authority. So I just wanted to really go through from section 2.4 in the report and then our response, the short and long-term response, just to give you an update of where we are. Okay, so first recommendation for local authorities was to plan for new responsibilities and ensure that they are adequately prioritised and resourced. So we've been we've got an apprentice in now. There's 2 younger officers who are training through, and officers have all registered now as the Class 1 competencies, and officers have sat and are awaiting, hopefully by the end of this week, if not early next week, the results of the one who's gone for a Class 3. We've got 2 on the Class 2A to F, and another officer who's gone for a Class 2A, which enables them to inspect and sign off at certain standards of work. So we are planning for those new responsibilities that have come through, and we are working towards those with a view to being signed off as of next week on successful results. Financial management and fee setting. Important here to highlight that when the auditor was in touch regarding gathering the information for the report, Swansea and John, the team leader here next to me, submitted the last 3 years of our sort of fee setting process, etc., to the auditor. And they were satisfied with the way Swansea is doing things. We are doing things in line with the regulations, and making sure that we're setting our fees correctly as the regulations require. So there's confidence there in that one. Opportunities to strengthen resilience through collaboration and regionalisation. This is a conversation that's still ongoing with Welsh Government and with LABC Cymru, and there's a meeting coming up now in a few weeks with all 22 authorities now to look at how we implement and bring this new regime forward in Wales, because this is it's obviously a Welsh issue, this one, not just Swansea. When we look at reviewing and strengthening our risk management process, we are signed up to the operational standards rules of how we must do things. We have an in-house QA/QC process. We also have the LABC Cymru QA process, and there's potentially a third coming through from Welsh Government when they've made a decision as to how they're going to implement that. So there'll be another level of scrutiny as to how we perform our duties. When we move into our short-term responses, we currently have recruitment out as it stands for 2 posts for senior building control officers, which closes next week. We have an apprentice in at the moment, and a few young lads who are training up as well. And apprentices are the way to go for us. In the future, we will be looking to try and engage and bring apprentices and train from within again. Staff have complied now. They are looking and have registered as Class 1s under the new scheme as registered building inspectors, with a view to working towards sitting their exams. And of course, we will consider action if any officer refuses. Okay. The new pay salary that was agreed structure has now been implemented, and that will go forward from April the 1st. So we've worked towards the short term, and we've identified and addressed and put measures in place. When we look at long-term, succession planning is key, not just for building control, it's key for everything we do within the authority. So there's a plan being developed there for the structure and how we see that working over the next 10 to 15 years and longer from there as well. Competencies and registrations of officers, yes, that will continue. There is an additional cost to us because it's a 4-year cycle, but we will continue to ensure that competencies and registrations are upheld. Already covered the collaboration with Welsh Government and other local authorities. That's a conversation that started, but a conversation that's got a long way to go yet as to how we work it with the requirements of the new building safety regime. And as I mentioned there with our financial records, the auditor was happy with what we submitted. When we look at creating an earmarked reserve, we're honest and upfront from the start. We've got to make a profit first for that. And at recent years, we've been below, but we've had vacancies which have helped. But it's a competitive market. It's always going to be a tricky situation. But we will address that on our figures as they come through. But it was really just to sort of highlight, we are aware, we have read the report, we're fully aware of what's going on in the audit report and what was information submitted in helping General Audit for Wales to put it together. There's a long road for us to go, but we are planning for it. We have the competency registrations in place, and officers have sat the exams. We're waiting on the results, but there are changes to come, and that's the whole point of the new building safety regime. When we look at the general to commercial to high risk and to high rise as well. So we're working towards that, and the plans are already being developed, and will be further developed as we go forward. So at that point, I think it's probably easier to hand back to yourselves for any questions.
Okay.
And we can respond.
I do have a list of questions from one of our, sorry. I do have a list of questions from Councillor Peter Black, who's sunning himself in some hot climes somewhere, which is lucky enough. I'll read out the questions, but some of them I'm not sure you'll be able to answer straight away. So what I'll do is I'll get you a copy, and then obviously we put in a letter as well, but I'll get you a copy of the questions anyway. The first question: who has replaced Peter Richards as head of building control?
That would be me at the moment. So that's answer one. It's an easy one.
Good luck on that. Oversight of big house builders and other builders doing their own building control. Is that correct?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again, Councillor?
The oversight of big house builders and other buildings, are they doing their own building control?
Yeah, no, they're not. The NHBC are a warranty provider. They also do building control work. But there's always been that issue, perhaps a conflict of interest, but they are authorised to do the building control work. Generally, the bigger builders have got a choice. They use NHBC. Sometimes they use local authority building control at other occasions.
I'll come back to that one because I'll go back a few years when. Anyway, I'll come back to that one. How many female surveyors have we, and the numbers and age profile?
We can respond to that question in writing with all the details.
Okay, fair enough. Resourcing for new responsibilities. I'm assuming that's to do with the new regulations that are coming in.
Again, I can provide a fuller response in writing to that,
Right,
but we're
okay.
working towards that as I set out in the report.
Annual reports and financial performance.
Again, we're working with finance on that, so I can provide a fuller written response in that with our finance colleagues.
How often are the risk management processes reviewed? Can you put your mic on, please?
Yearly,
Every year the risk profile is altered, is it?
yeah.
Okay. What extra staffing do we require? What extra staffing do you need to implement the 3 gateways of the P26 of the report, page 26 of the report?
So with the gateways, obviously there's different stages within the process of building control. We're looking at that design and construction phase, occupation phase of Gateway 3, would potentially be sitting within the housing realm. And that hasn't been bottomed out yet from Welsh Government, where it'll sit, who is doing what. So as it stands, I'm not able to give an answer here and now on that one, but certainly I can provide a fuller response in writing as to why we are where we are with it. But it's still being discussed by Welsh Government. We've sat in the workshops for occupation phase now, looking at how that will be implemented, but it's not been actually set by regulation yet.
Okay. To what extent is the building safety a corporate priority? I don't think that's appropriate for the members to answer. Sorry, for the officers to answer. I think the members need to answer that. I think we'll come back to that one. Has the specific plan been put in place to implement changes in the new Act? And if so, what is the timescale?
It's what we're working on now, to be honest. The timescale would be, yeah, I haven't got a deadline on that timescale for you, but that's what we're working on now with a new structure, how we resource it, how we pay it, how we staff it, as part and parcel of the model then as how it will be delivered. But we are already progressing now by having the staff registered. They're sitting the competency tests. That's step one. But we are looking at a wider sort of structuring as how this whole service will be resourced.
Okay. Do we have a member champion of for building control? Well, the cabinet member can answer that at some stage. The report says that 21 of the 22 authorities are not compliant with fee setting. Are we one of those?
No,
So we set fees.
we've set the fees, we've had ours looked at, and we're doing it to the proper method. And they've been looked at for 3 years by the audit, Welsh audit. They were happy with it.
Okay. is the income ring fence for building control as required in law? Are surpluses put into a earmarked reserve? Well, that's a good question.
And I think that's one that we are working with finance on it. To have a reserve, we've got to make a profit first. So that's part and parcel of the discussions we're having with finance of making sure that it is being evidenced. So
Okay,
I can provide a fuller response for you on that.
okay. Those are the questions from Councillor Peter Black. And I know there are other members who've stated that they want to ask questions. And Councillor Linda.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry. Yes, it was an excellent report, I thought, highlighting a lot of the issues that I think many of us were already aware of. It's a very damning indictment of the building development and the building control system right across not just Wales, but England as well. Scotland seem to be doing their own thing as usual. It's just a pity. You seem to have been taking the recommendations to heart and dealing with them. It's a pity the Welsh Government isn't acting a bit quicker and dealing with the recommendations that they've got to deal with. It would, I'm sure it would help you as well. I was just wondering, we haven't got anybody from the audit here, whether they're going to revisit this audit in a year or two's time. Do you know?
I don't know, but we do have a meeting coming up in May with LABC Cymru and Welsh Government. So that's a question that I can ask in that
would
meeting.
be interesting. Peter's asked. Yeah.
We're also working very collaboratively with the WLGA on this thing, because it's something that affects the whole of Wales, not just Swansea.
Yeah.
We are working, and I think, in fairness, I think we're very proactive in that role as well.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, Peter had already asked many of the questions I put down, but I just wondered, will these changes involve a closer working with the planning department in Swansea?
We work closely with the planning department already, so I'm not really sure in what, if you were able to give an example or a context for it.
It's been a while since I've been on the planning committee, but it did seem to come up at times that people had started building things in the wrong place, and
I say,
yes,
just chatting
and the
quickly
only
with you
one
on
that
there.
I visited was building control.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's likely that there will be more involvement when we look at these gateway phases from design, construction, etc. So I would expect there to be more of a relationship with building with planning, but officers obviously are responding, as do other elements of my team. When we look at planning applications that come through beyond just building control, we do act as a consultee and we do respond.
Thank you.
Councillor David Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it relates to 4.1 on pages 5/6, where it says potential risks to fulfil the requirements of the Building Safety Act to maintain service delivery if officers fail or refuse to undertake relative competency evaluation to become registered. I take it we haven't had anybody refuse or fail to do that.
Well, the results haven't been received yet for those who sat the test, so I'm hoping that we'll have 100 successful results coming the end of the week or into next week. There's only one officer that hasn't registered who's currently off on long term at the moment. But if something were to happen there, that we would certainly address that point when it came. But with regard to the sitting of the exam, if they fail, then we'll be looking at reset processes, etc. But we're working from a position of confidence in our team, and that they'll do well on the tests that they've sat.
That's great. That's great to hear. Thank you for that. Thanks.
Okay, are there any other members who've got questions? Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, actually on that point, succession planning is really, really important. I think you said you got 2 apprentices. How difficult is it to actually get people actually involved in this, and what sort of qualifications do they need to actually enter the profession, even at apprentice stage? And I think I read somewhere, this was in Wales, that the majority of people are actually, shall we say, qualified or actually in the profession are over 50. So we've got 2 apprentices. What sort of percentage are those apprentices to the total number of staff we've got?
Right. So working on percentages here. So there's one younger lad who's in as a LABC apprentice. We've got 2 other technicians who are newly started with us, who are all under 30, out of a team of 9 of surveyors. So that's a third. But yes, we do have a higher age sort of profile within the service, but it's going to be part of the plan that we're looking at now when we're sort of top filling and then also bringing more apprentices in underneath. But say with 3 of the officers now are under 30. So that's where we need to be sort of injecting now some of the new members as they come through with training. But it's a cycle now of that top end of retirements and bringing in and mentoring, and that's part and parcel of the succession plan that we're developing now on how to implement.
You actually said it's a competitive market. You know, you're not the only ones actually in this now attracting people. So how difficult will it be to actually hold, you know, is it more attractive really in, shall we say, the outside market compared to here?
That's a difficult one to answer, to be honest. I don't know the ins and outs of the private market. I know and work with our market and take advice from colleagues here. It's a competitive market for a reason. So it'll be competitive with what we can offer and what we do. And there are things that local authority will be able to do that the private sector can't, i.e. with high rise, with some of the class 3 work. So it's, you know, there are balances there. There are balances there with it. But yeah, that's the devil in the competitive market.
It'd be good for the local authority to actually look at this to see what we can do to actually keep these people, you know, once we get
and
over
that's part of what we're doing. That's part of our the longer term succession plan, is looking at that whole model of delivery and retention.
David Hopkins.
Could I give a commitment on that? Because politically, obviously, we know what the risks are. We understand totally that it sits on the risk register for that very reason about how fluid the situation is. But staff retention is paramount, and you know, it's not always our terms and conditions that matter to some people. You know, we are in a competitive market since 1984. You know, since Thatcher then put it out to the private sector and created this competition, it has been a difficult market. We have given a commitment that we are going to grow our own, that we've already started that process. And if we can't recruit in the open market now, then we will continue to do that, because I think it is important, not just in building services, but throughout the authority. We see the advantage of growing our own, particularly in you know, professional markets as well. So there is a commitment politically to try to work with this and actually look at market supplements where need be. Something we do on a regular basis when we need. So hopefully we can continue to do that.
Councillor Susan Jones.
Thank you. It's great that you've got the confidence in the people that have sat the exams. Is there a time scale if they fail? Is there a time scale, limited time?
No, they've got to submit the portfolio of their experience and qualifications before they take the competency evaluation exam. They choose a level of what they do, depending whether they're working on domestic work, more complex work, or some of the, you know, complicated high-rise football stadium, that type of thing. But if you fail, they'll give you feedback as to where you're lacking in your examination result, and you can address that. They've got to prove that they're able to work at that competency before they're even allowed to take the validation test. My team at the moment, and anyone undertaking at the moment, we've done it early. So if we have got any issues, we can do it again before October, when the main part of the BSR regulations come in Wales. But
Good.
I'm pretty confident that the guys that have done it should pass.
Great. Is there progression then on that qualification?
Sorry, I missed that.
Is there progression on that qualification, that they can actually go up a a level, if you like, yeah?
Yeah, yes. As Tom mentioned earlier, every building control inspector needs to be registered Class 1 even to work within the team. The Class 2A would be the domestic, and then once you've got the domestic inspection validation, we're looking for people to move on to the 2B to F, and then the Class 3. We've got entrance at every level at the moment, so provided we get the validation, we've got a full set of validated registered building inspectors for the Swansea team, which means that we can function at every level.
Brilliant, thank you for that.
Councillor Chris Evans.
Just wondering how many of those staff are currently at level 3 and how many are taking the exams currently for level 3?
One at level 3.
Any more taking the exam?
No. The others are taking 2A to F and 2A.
Okay, Chris. Councillor Paxton Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Quick question. We didn't come back and follow up in terms of what Councillor James was asking you, because I'm not quite sure what the situation is. Obviously, your inspectors go out and look at what work is being done. Do they then compare that work with the original plans in terms of siting of buildings, etc.? And if so, if they notice any discrepancies, will they report that back to enforcement or planning at all in any way, shape or form?
No, building control don't undertake any role in checking building lines. It's a planning function. The planning team would deal with that through their planning enforcement team. It's not a building control function.
The only problem from that, as I see it, is basically the planning department will tell you they haven't got the time to do those checks themselves. So I'm not quite sure who is supposed to be doing those checks on that basis.
I think that's a very valid point by Councillor Paxton Williamson about the definitions of what people do, because building regs, you'd seem to think that anything involved with building should be regulated by building regs, whereas planning should be the initial, if you like, agreement that people can build it. But there is a fine line there, whereas if what might be built may be not contrary to what is in the planning application, and as such that's enforcement, and if it's out the line, but it's the actual method of building and the building materials, etc., which is building regs. Is I correct?
Yeah, that's right. Building regulations deal with the technical requirements. For example, you could build a block of flats in the back garden in Mansleton. It would probably comply with building regs. It certainly wouldn't get past planning.
It wouldn't get past the people in Mansleton either. Councillor Chris Evans again.
Sorry, just to go back to my previous question, I was wondering how to word it. What would happen if the one person that's level 3 went off on the second or long term? Is there any sort of plan to cover that?
Sorry, Councillor, you broke up on that last bit then of the question. What happens if the
person, because there's one person at level 3, if they went off on, say, long-term sick, for example, is there any plan to cover that person?
Currently, we would have to look to collaborative local authorities potentially to look to try and sort of fill that area of work. Our long-term plan obviously is to grow from within, but there's a time implication with that because, as John has mentioned, they've got to develop and submit a portfolio prior to being able to sit an exam. So we are working towards trying to get more Class 3s internally. But yeah, we would have to look at, as would other authorities, would have to look at the collaborative function if they haven't got a Class 3.
Okay.
Class 3s obviously are looking at the technical and also then high rise in that sense as well. So they are, I suppose, there's less of that build, as it were, from the normal sort of volume of what we do. But yes, it's still a critical thing that we need to consider.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other members? No? Can I come back on a number of these things because having been around quite a while, and having seen the work of building regs, and one thing that strikes me is that we used to do a lot of building regs for many other authorities. Can remember us doing them far and wide in parts of England as well. Why has that stopped? Is it because of the private sector, or have we stopped doing it because we haven't got the staff? I think that question is because that comes back to the fee reviews. Now, if we are competing in an open market scale, in surveying, in other parts of the professional sport, professional roles that we have within the authority, when we done a review, we came out as good, if not better, than many of the private sector. So it is surprising that in building regs that we don't come out as good, if not better, than the in competitive terms with the private sector. So I think the question needs to be asked: why do you think we're losing out on contracts to do building regs in other parts of the country? And do the fees, are they part of that problem?
I don't think so, Councillor. The work that we did in other parts of the UK were with local partners, contractors, architects. They work in partnership with an individual local authority. At one time, we had 8 partners, people like Liberty Property, Griffiths and Glass Architects. Literally, they would work all over the UK. We would look after their approvals here, and the local authority where the actual thing was built would do the inspection work. Liberty aren't doing much work anymore. Griffiths and Glass is contracted to just Griffiths. We've got 7 or 8 partners at the moment. They generally work in Wales. We do inspection work for other partners. So if Boots or Halfords are doing work, they work closely with a local authority in England, and we do the inspection work here. But the market's contracted. That is literally something that goes right across the board for the private sector and the public sector. The interest rates are making an impact on development.
So it's the quantity of work that's out in the marketplace which is causing the contraction as opposed to anything else. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Okay. The annual reports and financial performance, and well, we used to have them many years ago, but admittedly there was a lot more people employed. We used to see quite a bit of it, but I haven't seen one for a few years. So maybe when that's up and running again, the scrutiny board can get back to having a look at that and check to see what we're actually doing.
Yep.
Okay. I think there's another issue which I think we need to understand, and that is about whether or not we should, once you start making money, whether we should have, or if you continue making money, then put it that way, whether we should have an independent reserve and a earmarked reserve. And I think that is one issue. Obviously, that will have to be taken up with the financial department as well, because I suspect the financial officer won't let you to have anything. But I think that's something we need to take up at a political level more than anything else, because building, and we all know after the sad case of what had happened in London, there is more concern about building regs now than has ever been in the years I've been in a councillor. So I think that there are issues around that we need to address, and for the sake of a public that we need to keep scrutinising. So I think the annual report is necessary, and I think we need to take further the need for a financial reserve so that you would have the opportunity to actually get other staff in if necessary. Councillor Hopkin.
Yeah, can I give some commitment? That's exactly what we are doing at the moment, is looking out, particularly with not just growing our own but getting that position where we are more commercially viable and more, when we do far more work where we can in that very aggressive market, as I did say. So whatever we can, we are in the process of doing that review at this time, because I think it is time to change. There has never been a better time in reality. So hopefully, with that commitment, we will look at what we can do to make it far more commercial and act commercially with that reserve as well, and reinvest into the department where we can.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else now? Because the one thing I would ask is that in the none too distant future, that you come back and present to us what the review has shown, and what how that review is going forward. Because I think, as I said, I think there's more interest in building regs now than there's ever been, and understandably why, because of what happened at Grenville. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. You're more than welcome to stay for the very, very interesting annual review of wellbeing and the performance monitoring report. It's thrilling. You can stay if you like. Fortunately, Councillor Hopkins, you have to. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the annual report the annual report on the wellbeing objectives. David?
I've got nothing to add to the report, and Richard is with us today. There's no difference to the review. This is the same as last year, and there've been no amendments to it, to my knowledge. So more than happy to hand over to Richard on this particular issue.
Okay, Richard, so entirely up to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the report starts on page 64 of your papers, and it introduces the outcome from the annual review of our wellbeing objectives. The objectives were set back in March 2023 with the approval of the corporate plan, and that covers the period 2023 to 2028. Nevertheless, we have to review the wellbeing objectives each year. It's a requirement of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and the purpose really is just to check that they remain fit for purpose. So the review concerned the objectives themselves. It wasn't about the detail to deliver the objectives or to measure them. It was about the objectives. So they were reviewed by looking at what changes had taken place since March last year to the evidence base that was used to determine the objectives, and to see if that would imply making any changes to the objectives, whether that's the wording or adding or removing objectives, or a combination of those different options, or indeed no changes at all. So the review concluded that no changes to the objectives was needed, and so the Council's wellbeing objectives remain unchanged for the next financial year, and a report summarising the review is attached at Appendix A, starting on page 68, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Any members got any questions on this item? Councillor Jeff Jones?
Yeah, just a point. You say there's no changes to the plan. Just out of interest, on page 73, it's got a heading 4.4. New evidence shows that the local economic delivery plan will help drive forward investment, economic activity. It'd be interesting, really, if that's new evidence. Is it possible to actually see that new evidence? You know, you're actually talking about forward investment, economic activity, reduce the ongoing productivity gap. You must be comparing this year to last year. Have we got that information available, or? It'd be nice to see an update, really, because you must be measuring one year against the next.
Yeah, so just in terms of this particular exercise, what we did is that we reviewed the evidence that was used to set the objectives in the first place, and then we looked to see if anything else had emerged during the year, the main purpose of which really was just to determine whether or not that implied that any changes were required to the wellbeing objectives, and there was nothing beyond that purpose, really.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So that because there's no changes, the review just carries on as it is. So that the wellbeing the objective is exactly the same. It's just that because we've done what happened last year is carrying on this year. There's been no changes at all.
It'd be nice really to actually, I don't know, where we can see that, Chair, you know what I mean? You know, forward investment, economic activity, to see the information. You know, you must have that information somewhere. Somebody must be looking at it, you know?
Yeah, I think Jeff.
As a comparison.
Richard, are you still with us? Hello? Oh, he's back though, is he?
Can you hear us, Richard? No. No.
Can you hear me?
Richard, we can't hear you at all. Got Di Jones has got us questions, hasn't he? What page was that you were on? Yeah, I don't know where he's gone now. He's just locked up. There he
Hello?
is it? Hi, Chair. Hello, Richard. Nice to see
Hi.
you back.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think my connection problems with the internet. Was there a question?
Yeah, Councillor Jones wanted to know where have we got how do we did the comparing between yearly, but from what you were saying, just to clarify the position, because there's no change, there is no point in having that if you like carrying on as we are type of thing.
Yeah, that's right. The evidence that we looked at is for a limited purpose. It's purely to see whether or not there was a need to change the wellbeing objectives. So the evidence that we looked at, which was based upon the evidence that was used to set the objectives in the first place, we were looking to see if any of that had changed or whether any additional evidence had come to light since, which would determine that we might look to change the wellbeing objectives. And all the evidence that we looked at, none of that suggested that we should change the objectives, but we looked at that evidence purely for those purposes only, not for any other purpose.
Okay. Jeff?
It's just the fact that it actually says new evidence shows, you see, so that the local will help drive forward investment. So there seems to be new evidence actually showing that, you know, there are changes. I'm sorry to be pedantic and so on. It'd be nice really to see, you know, evidence of economic activity and, you know, reducing the productivity gap and so on, you know. It'd be nice to see what you actually look at.
I think if I read it right, Richard, on 7.4, new evidence outlined in the successful and sustainable Swansea corporate transformation plan has helped to address the long-term challenges of the objective. So what actually saying there is there's nothing new in it. It's just that the evidence that was in that plan, which was new at that time, is just carrying on. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, nothing in that evidence contradicted the need or implied the need to change our wellbeing objectives. It's not really about the evidence or the information that sits underneath the wellbeing objective in the corporate plan. It's about the objectives themselves. That's the statutory requirement that we have to review the objectives, and nothing in the evidence, whether it was the previous evidence that we looked at or any new evidence came to light, suggested that we should change our wellbeing objectives. And we only looked at the evidence in that narrow sense. We didn't look at it for any other purpose. Just do we need to, is there any evidence that suggests that we should change our wellbeing objectives? And the evidence suggested that we shouldn't.
Okay, so effectively we just carried on as we did last year.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor David Jenkins.
Yeah, just thank you, Chair. Yeah, I got a couple of questions there on paragraph 3.4. it says the evidence shows that there's a need to ensure that all children and young people attend school regularly and are included and resilient and have the skills to be able to enter local employment opportunities. So my question is, what's the top 2 skills you concentrating on in order for young people to enter local employment?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think it's probably a question that's best answered by the education department. As I said, the review, this particular review, and what we were looking at really is any of the evidence that we looked at, did it suggest that we should change our wellbeing objectives? It wasn't about the detail or the detail to deliver those wellbeing objectives. It's purely focused on, do we need to change the wellbeing objectives? So any questions on that and the details probably best directed at the education department.
What we might do, David, is we'll keep that on record and ready for the next, and send it over to education and ask them for their view on that.
Okay, yeah, because like I said, it's there's a lot of things on here which are sort of corporate speak, really, and they don't give the detail, you know. So the other question would be the same answer, really, because it asks, you know, how are they making young people placed at the centre of decision making? So I'd have to leave that question to another day as well, then, is it?
I think so. I don't think Richard, who's the compiler of the data, is the man to answer the technical details that lie underneath that. Councillor Hopkins?
Could I just come in? Just bear in mind, this is a statutory obligation that we need to set our objectives. And when we have set these wellbeing objectives, I think what we are saying is we work with our colleagues in education and across the authority, because these are corporate responsibilities. So what we have done is review them, seen that what we are doing, we believe has worked. We are in the right direction. So all we've done is reiterate and stay to this exactly the same corporate well-being objectives. And it is just what we've done is reviewed it, but there are specifics that feed into each department, would feed into them objectives. So if we would want further information on how these are set, they ain't got a problem in setting out, sending some information out how we get to this, how do we get to these plans. But so we wouldn't have the detail on particular issues like education's targets as well at the moment. Sorry,
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, what we can do is at some stage ask the various departments for details within that wellbeing plan. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
If there's nothing else, no other questions? I can't see anyone anyway. Right, okay, thank you very much. Right, Richard, moving on to agenda item 8, the performance monitoring report. David?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Like buses, all these reports of mine comes in one after the other. It's anyway. What I would say before us today, we've got the report. The 76% of the targets have hit target. We are on green. There are some challenges within the report, particularly on workforce and particularly in social care. I know it's we have talked about this went to council that there are real concerns. And I think we are doing what we can, particularly in child and family, where we are looking at growing our own and particularly foster care. And so we are doing what we can to try to mitigate some of the risks. What I do like about the new layout of the particularly the corporate plan is where we get to see the directors and the chief executives assessment, so they can give the narrative of where we are throughout. So it explains the process a lot easier, and I think it puts that narrative down and understands the data far clear. And what I do like is we include the risk as well in this. So more than happy, and I put on record again my thanks to Richard for what I can say, making a difficult subject quite easy to read. So Richard, more than happy to hand over to yourself.
Okay, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So this report sets out performance for the third quarter of the year, meeting the council's wellbeing objectives as they've been described in the corporate plan. As you can see in paragraph 2.1 and 2.2 on page 84, this is the second quarter where we are reporting using the new format, performance report, that was just mentioned by Councillor Hopkins. The intention is to produce something which is more comprehensive, seeks to bring together the qualitative and the quantitative data in a more rounded way to better describe progress meeting the wellbeing objectives. That includes bringing together the steps in the corporate plan, the success measures, the performance data, and as Councillor Hopkins mentioned, the corporate risks as well, with that overall evaluation then provided by the Chief Executive, which builds upon the individual assessments for each wellbeing objective that have been provided by lead directors and heads of service. So just quickly looking at the Q3 report itself on Appendix A, which starts on page 89, which you can see sort of in the left-hand side of the report, or if you look in the bottom right, it's down as page 1. You can see there is an overarching assessment of performance at Q3, which has been provided by the Chief Executive. And then just starting on the next page, we have each of the corporate objectives in turn, starting with the safeguarding people from harm objective, where again we have an overall assessment of performance against this objective provided by the Director of Social Services, which you can see on page 90 or page 2 in the bottom right hand side. And then on pages 91 and 92, there is an update on each of the steps in the corporate plan to meet the safeguarding objective. And then on page 93, there is an update against the success measures for safeguarding, and then the corporate performance indicators. You can see that on page 94, and then finally the corporate safeguarding risk, which is on page 96. And then that format is repeated through the rest of the report for each of the corporate objectives in turn. So that's the overall structure of the report. Just going quickly back to the covering report and looking at the pie charts, starting on page 84, just under paragraph 2.3. They provide a summary of performance at Q3, and it shows that the majority of the items were on track during the third quarter. And then on paragraph 2.3.1 on page 86, that highlights some of the key areas of achievement during Q3, and then in paragraph 2.3.2, the next paragraph, that shows the main areas where, as at Q3, further improvements are needed. Happy to try and answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Any members, any questions? I can't see any. Richard, can I ask, on page 85, we see the increased risk score of 10%. What is that?
I'd have to have a check to see which risks are affected by that, Chair. See the
when I went through the report, on red, I know there's some pink colours on there, but percentage of care and support plans due to be reviewed, completed within statutory timescale is 1. There's another one then, percentage of visits to children in the CPR. But the biggest one was safeguarding, corporate risks and objectives, inherent risk, overall RAG. Why is that, I wonder?
Yeah, so that particular part of the report and that particular pie chart, what that's looking at is the corporate risks specifically. So at the end of each of the objectives, you can see all the corporate risks. And within each of the corporate risks, you have what's called an inherent risk. So that's the level of risk before any sort of control measures have been applied to it. So that would be the risk, the level of risk if we were doing nothing to control it. And then what we have then is what's called the residual risk. So once the control measures have been applied, what is the risk score after that? So if we look at the safeguarding risk, for example, we can see that the inherent risk is 25. So that's about the highest you can get, really. But then with the risk controls applied, that risk has reduced down to 16. It's still red, so it's still high risk, still a high likelihood and impact. And that's why it's red. But because the control measures are in place, the score is reduced to 16. And you can see that it was 16 at the end of September, and it's still 16 at the end of December, which of course is the end of Q3. So that's the explanation for it, for the scores.
Thank you very much, because it does, the inherent risk in the education offer was 15, but overall it's now down to amber on 9, which is good. But that explanation just does qualify for all of it. The only other one then is forget the regeneration one, but I think the only other one is the absence one, because you know, there's nothing you can, you know, we keep on fighting that every time. The other only other interesting one was the corporate risks for the objectives, cost of living costs crisis, because, you know, admittedly, there's not much we can do about that. And so I can understand why we are 16 and 25 in the inherent risk of 25. But the risk has actually gone up from the 3rd of the 9th to the 31st of the 12th to 25. Obviously, is that purely and simply down to the interest rates and that type of thing?
Yes, I mean the risk covers you know, quite a range of issues to do with the cost of living crisis, and something which is highlighted, you know, within the report is the issues around accommodation and homelessness and temporary accommodation, which is obviously related to that particular issue. So and the risks are reviewed on a monthly basis as well. So the scores can change, you know, over the month depending on what factors have arisen as well.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's paragraph 2.3.2, and it's on page 87, and that's bullet point 4. It talks about the numbers in temporary accommodation have continued to grow, and that we are now at the highest level of households occupying bed and breakfast accommodation. And to mitigate this, we are progressing with an alternative to B&B, which will create an additional 60+ units of temporary accommodation. I just wondered if you could elaborate on what this temporary accommodation is, and if it's proving valuable, and are we going to possibly look to increase that number if there is a continual rise in need? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard, do you know, or do you want to make inquiries?
Yeah, I think that probably is something which should be answered by the Housing Department, I think, Chair.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, can I give some clarity? What we are doing, we are looking at alternative accommodation, particularly in and around the city centre, where we are working with Pobl to look at, we work with Welsh Government at the moment, looking at using further other accommodation other than bed and breakfast. I know Councillor Andrew Lewis is working very hard at this particular time, trying to work with Welsh Government to try to mitigate some of the risk around homelessness. It is a continuing problem, I must admit, and I know she's doing all she can. So it is somewhere else within the city centre we are looking at. Pobl as a partnership arrangement, I believe we're not far off having that clarity, and it should be, I'm pretty confident, happening very shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, Wendy.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Are there any other questions, or sorry, Councillor Linda James?
Page 40 of the report, and it's got an item. There's no number, which makes it a bit difficult. Produce a series of Wild About Your ward maps. And these are baseline maps prepared for all wards. Opportunity maps being developed. When are they going to be available for ward councillors?
No idea.
No.
Richard, do you have any idea about that?
No, I think that would have to be directed at the responsible department, I think.
What department is it, do you know?
Which item is it?
I believe it's Deb Hill. That is Welderbury Ward. And I'll circulate that. Yeah, Deb Hill was working on a series of Welderbury Ward.
Right. Okay. Anyone else? If not, can I thank you, Richard, for the report and the update? And I think no, you're not due for another couple of months, a couple of meetings anyway. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
The next item is item number 9, item 9 on the agenda, which is the work plan. And it's planning an annual performance report. Well, funny enough, you coming back again, David, that one?
I can't wait.
Okay, all right. And then we haven't got the other one, have we? Then the next item are the letters, item 10 on the agenda. Are there any questions on the letters?
We haven't had a response to the last letter that was sent, yeah, you know, the action points there, so look, you know, the your response, this is the ongoing holding costs on Debenhams and general trading status of the Dolphin Hotel, visitor numbers of Penderyn. We haven't had any reply to that, have we? No.
So is that the letter that's just been sent?
I think so, yes. If I can, sorry, I'm trying to find the date.
Yeah, so there's one that's just gone from the last meeting, so response due by the 18th
28th
of
of March.
April. Yeah, so 18th of April, we've
Pick
got
up,
that one.
Look forward to that.
Okay. If that's all, can I thank you all very much for your attendance and the questions everybody asked. And look forward to see you soon. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Goodbye.